Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today is May 18th, 2023. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by Chint Power Systems, CPS America as they're known, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. With a focus on commercial and utility-scale solar and energy storage, the company partners with customers to provide unparalleled performance and service. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters from 25 kW to 275 kW, exceptional data communications and controls, and energy storage solutions designed for seamless integration with CPS America systems. CPS America has offices in California, New Jersey, and Texas. Learn more at chintpowersystems.com. Welcome to the show, John Weaver, my co-host and Mr. Commercial Solar Guy.
So, Tim, CPS isn't going to be very happy with you if you forget their names. I mean, I had to call them the other day, and I got in trouble with my sales guy saying, because I was like, "Are you guys Chint or you CPS? What's the business name? How do I do my documents?"
I know
He goes, "Listen, here's the company."
it is a little unusual that they have two brands.
They have two names, two first names.
And it is what it is. And Chint rolls off the tongue. I love the name Chint.
Yes.
But it is a little confusing. But you can call them either or, Chint,
Yes.
Chint Power Systems, or CPS America, and we're grateful for their support because they make this show possible. And so check them out, chintpowersystems.com. And we'll be dropping another interview with them coming up in June. So looking forward to that.
What's the topic?
But we are going to be talking about their service organization, actually.
Ooh, O&M. I like O&M.
You know, it's funny. Brian Wagner, the president of Chint, he has a saying: "We make a product that is guaranteed to fail." Eventually, the inverter is going to fail.
Wow.
And
At least they're honest. They know their business well. That is smart.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
And these inverters are doing the heavy lifting, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the most intense jobs that happens in a solar farm or solar array, and so
Them and the tracker, and so if you own a utility scale solar facility, your two alive pieces is your tracker motor that sits on top of your racking and turns those long torque tubes that all your solar panels are attached to, and your inverter. The solar panel is like the super genius that just lays there. But the inverter is the one who's every single day, all right, let's manage these animals, let's bring them together. And so, I don't know, I always say that the solar panel gets all the attention, all the pictures are of the pretty solar panels, but the actual workhorse is the inverter. So,
Yep.
Everybody needs to know about that. It's very important. All right,
Indeed.
we got to talk about news. Talking about news, right, Tim? That's what we do.
We do. The Treasury Department releases some guidance to boost
Yes.
American clean energy manufacturing, and everybody's chomping at the bit for this official guidance. It's the nitty-gritties of how the IRA is going to be rolled out to speed the energy transition, as we like to say here at the Clean Power Hour. And this particular guidance is around domestic content. If you build a solar farm, we already know that you get the 30% tax credit, the ITC, right? You get accelerated depreciation. You might get RECs if you're in a special market, but you might get other adders for ITC for low and medium income. You might get adders for energy communities, and of course for domestic content, or I just say made in America. One question I still don't have an answer to, John, and maybe you do, and that is, does domestic content include Canada and Mexico?
Nope.
No.
U.S. Everything is
Okay.
U.S. No no friend shoring, no NAFTA shoring, nothing so far to the best of my knowledge. So that's though I'm wondering if Canada, we'll look it up and we'll make sure we know this answer. But Hanwha, Q-Cell in Georgia, I believe, is using a Canadian glass source, and it seems like they should be able to do that in the U.S. to pump up their module pricing a little bit. But who knows? I mean, yeah.
So the other question I have is, if you're buying modules and the module maker says, "Oh yeah, we qualify for the domestic content adder, but use at your own risk or own judgment. So who is the official, who's the official judge, and then who do you hire to verify that, yes, indeed, the product you're buying is going to qualify, it's going to meet the IRS rules and regulations? Do you have answers?
I
I have
wouldn't say I have
questions.
Please, no, you know what? I have listened to multiple podcasts and read multiple articles, and I had a very
Did you say
smart
listen
person.
to a podcast?
Yes,
Oh
I
my
did.
lord! Oh
Oops,
my
I
lord!
did. I
The sky
did.
is falling. The sky is falling.
This is the news of the week, Tim. You put it at the top of the article before I even had a chance. So I have to do this. In fact, for PV Magazine, I will be doing a deep dive into the document. So
Okay.
I'll have some good answers for you soon. But in terms of that one, which was a very interesting thing to hear, the question that was asked on the podcast, actually, technically, it wasn't a podcast, it was a webinar. It was a live QA. Hey, Chris is here. The question that was asked was, can the IRS, Joseph is here as well. Hey, guys, thanks for watching us. Can the IRS force a manufacturer to provide a letter to show the status of their manufacturing content, and are the components made in the U.S., are they assembled in the U.S., and how these come together, what kind of labor? And the way the lawyer who was responding said, no, the IRS cannot force them to supply a letter at the time of sale. You just have to trust it. And if the IRS decides to investigate, the IRS can compel them to provide something directly to the IRS, maybe, in order to move forward with it. And that was how one person suggested it might occur, that the IRS might have eventually a big list of manufacturers who say their product is made in the USA and at this percentage, because you can't just call it made in the USA, because the document says 40% of manufactured goods on a project level. So it's a combination of, say, they're wondering about transformers, but your switchgear, your racking, not your racking and your foundation. Maybe your racking because it's aluminum, but your foundation and maybe your frames. If your foundations and your frames for racking are made out of iron or steel, they have to be 100% American-made iron or steel. But the rest of your goods, your tracker, your inverter, your modules, your balance of system, your wiring, your switchgear, etc., all of those components that are manufactured and assembled have to be 40%. And so you as a developer has to feel confident that you have a list of all of your components, and you got to put them in a spreadsheet or something and say, all right, here's my cost of everything I bought, and here's the amount that is made in the USA, and is it 40% of this equation? And it's going to take a little bit of extra work, some extra accounting, to be able to prove and defend your 40% manufactured goods.
And it's 40% of the price of the goods, say a solar panel, right? On a price basis, that 40% of the product in the solar panel is coming from the U.S.
So there's going to be a nuance.
That's what Helene told me.
Okay, so then, yeah, so there was talk that, and so there's some nuance here. There's going to be a price, profit, cost consideration. And if it's 40% of the price, cool, price that they sell. I know they talked about them being able to use labor costs in the U.S. versus not being able to use them in certain times. So if the component is from somewhere else, then the labor associated with that component doesn't count toward the 40%. But if the other component is made in the U.S., then that labor does count. So they're going to have to be sharp in how they break down the cost structure of their components. And I'm not certain if it's the price or the cost, Tim. So there was talk specifically about manufacturers not wanting to let loose their profit margins. And
No.
so there you go. So somewhere, yeah, we got to work on this, and we got to get a lawyer on the show, or CPA type who's reviewing the document to talk about it.
I have to say, I find this press release very frustrating. It's like it dances around issues, but it doesn't give straight answers. Seemingly, in my opinion, probably was written by lawyers, and so yeah, maybe
Yeah, and this
we need a lawyer to interpret the legalese.
and this isn't the final guidance. This is a document that points toward additional guidance from what I was
Hmm.
hearing. So this isn't
Yeah,
final. None of
yeah,
these are final. Every single one of the guidances that have come out aren't the final version. They're just a version that will lead toward the next version.
right.
So
Yeah,
so we still got a lot to go, but this starts to suggest where we're going. Now, there's been a lot of chatter. So I don't know if you noticed the stock price of First Solar shot like 20% or some big number, 10% the morning that this came out. And the reason is
yeah,
that it's been suggested that if you want your solar panels to be domestic content, the cell must be made in the U.S. Now, I'm not certain if they said the cell must or if they said it's impossible to meet it without the cell being. So that's a very different position there. But people were talking about how the cell and how First Solar might be the only company and the only projects that meet it will be ones with First Solar modules. So there was talk about whether or not the current structure of the guidance is even viable, and that hypothetically, the Treasury could very much so adjust their goals if they find it not viable. So, if nobody can get made in the USA, essentially, then it's like, well, this is a useless incentive, unless the Treasury starts to see there are other companies who are moving toward becoming made in the USA. So it's, we'll see. It's still coming to us, still learning.
yeah. Well, let's switch gears and talk about net metering. I found a press release from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. We just call them the
Hmm.
National Academies, about net metering practices should be revised to better reflect the value of integrated distributed electricity generation into the nation's power grid. The release is about a report. The report is called The Role of Net Metering in Evolving Electricity System. And as you and I know, John, net metering is one of the foundational elements of a good DG or solar market, right? Because it values the energy that comes off of an array equivalent to, if you have retail, which is the goal, right? Retail net metering, it one electron from solar PV is equivalent to what the grid provider is charging the customer. And this really incentivizes customers to adopt solar. If you take away net metering, like they've done now in California, or greatly reduce the value, they reduced the value of net metering, I think, by 75% in California with NEM 3.0 starting in April. And it really puts a damper on things because what it does is it extends the payback period, right? It devalues the solar electrons. And I don't see the justice in that. I really don't think the grid operators have a leg to stand on. And this report basically says, look, guys, this is really good for consumers when you have retail net metering, and it's going to be good for the grid because it's going to incentivize the adoption of distributed energy, solar and batteries, and we all understand now that we have to green the grid if we're going to step back from climate change, from climate chaos, right? It's so frustrating that utilities are fighting net metering. It makes me want to pull what little hair left I have.
Yeah.
You obviously already pulled out all of your hair about this, John.
Oh yes, it burnt off. It burnt away very quickly. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm very pro net metering because if only because it also helps to defend against the monopoly power that drags its feet. The monopoly needs to be put in fear, and the utilities are monopolies. I mean, we have utilities that are borderline racketeering, they're borderline mobsters. And if these utilities don't have somebody putting pressure on them, they are going to break the law. I mean, we have First Energy who spent tens of millions of dollars to bribe officials in Ohio to get $1 billion or $2 billion bailout. I mean, it cost them 60 million bucks to get like 1 to 2 billion. Man, that is an amazing return on investment. In your state, Tim, Con Edison had a major bribery scandal. Now it looks like First Energy's bribery issues went over to Pennsylvania, possibly. We
Yep.
know that the state of Florida has FPL slash NextEra, which is an amazingly corrupt group of companies. I mean, they literally bought a newspaper in order to put out fake news in support of them. They hired some group called the Matrix or Matrix Consulting, and based out of Alabama, to harass and chase down reporters who talk negatively about them. They're associated with the funding of a fake political candidate in the state of Florida to make people not vote for a Democrat. They lied, their CEO lied in the public, saying, oh no, we've never been subpoenaed on this Jacksonville thing we wanted to buy. Because it was found that they tried to bribe this Jacksonville power plant manager with a new job for like $250,000 a year. It turns out not only were they subpoenaed, the CEO, the guy who lied, he was interviewed by the FBI. Like, if he had lied to the FBI and said that, he'd be in jail because you're not allowed to lie to the FBI. And so, like, we have power companies that are just like, you know, they need the boot. They need the boot on the neck. And the boot on the neck is 300 million Americans who are saying, you know what, screw you. I'm going to build a solar power system. I'm going to save the planet. I'm going to save some money. And I don't care about you making your guaranteed 10% profit. So net metering needs to be done correctly. It is the fundamental power of the people legislation. It is the democracy of energy that is necessary to make everybody else work. Because otherwise we get fat off of feeding on a captured clientele, which is the population. And we can't do that. The machine needs to have a space for the people to push back. And if they don't, the system will fail, because that's how evolution works. It eats the dumb, the slow, the terribly designed. And if we have gotten rid of capitalism, which we have, in utility competition, then we got some problems. So we need good net metering. This article is actually, it's not an article, Tim. It's a 100+ page book. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of reviewing. I was hoping to write an article for PV Mag, but 100 pages. I might have to summarize it a tiny bit.
I'm glad that the DOE is funding this work, and that's what good government is for, to look out for you and I and all of the residents of the United States and our clean energy future. Because people will take it away if we're not careful. I mean, I'm still kind of in shock about NEM 3.0. I don't work a lot in California, so it doesn't have a big impact on me personally. And some people are nonchalant about it and just say, well, now there's new incentives for storage, and everything's gonna be fine. And California does require new residential construction be solarized or solar ready. I don't know the exact details, but and we should jump real quick back to Chris's comment about Chris Letman says another caveat for the module side of this manufacturer. Another caveat for the module side is the manufacturer has to price out the cost of components. Yes, that are to be qualified for domestic content. I don't see that happening with module companies. I have to disagree, because how else are asset owners going to use this adder on the modules, which is one of the most expensive parts of the solar field? They're not going to let otherwise First Solar just walks away with it, right? And if you're a utility developer, that's all you buy. I mean, of course, a lot of the utility work is already First Solar. The 800 megawatt double black diamond project that's happening in Illinois is a First Solar project.
I bet what's going to occur is that module manufacturers are going to simply give a number. They're going to say we're 57%, we're 42%, we're 59%. Our documents are on record with the IRS. End of story. Here's my percentage. Maybe they'll have a sticker, a new sticker. 47% USA made. And that'll be what works. So we'll see.
And then Joe asks, will the IRA or CJEB, which is our Illinois legislation, train skilled labor? Or he says it will. And then is there paid training for solar design and solar sales consultants? I mean, to some extent, the answer is yes, Joe. But the devil is in the details. Like most of the funding, I think, is going towards installers, the boots on the ground labor, but there's no reason why you can't learn those skills in those training programs. So I would just follow the Illinois Shines website. That's the Illinois specific program. Network with your ICEA members, right? The Illinois Solar Energy Association, or Solar and Storage Association, as it's now known. And I don't know, John, do you have an opinion about that? Do the training incentives in the IRA qualify for design and sales?
I don't know the training incentives well enough. When I first heard about them way back when, I was told that we would learn as our state legislatures began to put out rules on the training. And so I haven't necessarily seen anything from Massachusetts. So I've been wanting to pay attention to it because we would really love to have an on-the-ground electrician who's project manager in commercial solar guy. And I'm trying to figure out how to make that next step in terms of growth. We need to get a little more sales, a little more projects so we can have a project manager who's visiting sites. And I'd love to see if we can get some support with it from all these programs, but I don't know them yet. So, if we had somebody on the show again, Tim, here's another idea. Somebody who can talk about these programs in various states and various markets that have put in legislation, because I'm very interested to see what people are doing so I can help my own business and help us grow. I'd love to see some design.
maybe that's Vote Solar or SEIA.
You know what? I just gave some money to Vote Solar last week. So it's a good time to ask them for a favor and see if they have any feedback. Yeah. And maybe SEIA too. Dan Whitten, who's a longtime SEIA press guy, he's retiring from SEIA, and I think he's going to maybe start his own press firm, but something in the communications industry, clean energy communication industry. So maybe we
So
can reach
anyway,
out
I
to
mean,
SEIA.
if our listeners are not familiar with Vote Solar, check it out, votesolar.org. Great organization fighting the good fight for good legislation in a whole handful of states. And I've had Will Kenworthy and John Delury, who both work in the Midwest, on the show, but we would love to have Vote Solar back. So we'll reach out to our colleagues there. This story you have in PV Magazine, Flirting with Fossil Fuels, the Faux Crusade for Responsible Solar. What is that story about? And why is there no author? It's an opinion?
Yeah, definitely an opinion piece by me. I mean, I wrote it, but
Okay.
but it is an opinion. They wanted to put it in there because we're being very aggressive and attacking. But this is our summary and a little bit more background information on the NPR story from a few months back, where we had the fake solar group, Citizens for Responsible Solar, and we're prepping a 2 or 3 article run where we're going to describe who they are so that developers know who they are on sites. And then second, we're going to go through the arguments that they present and do our best to respond to them so that solar developers have maybe a toolkit to just, get the general gist of what these people say and how they attempt to muddy solar development processes and town meetings, and then give tools to respond to their crap. So this is just article number 1. We summarized a bunch of stuff, and we found some other stuff. And we found that this lady that runs Citizens for Responsible Solar is a pretty solid scumbag. She had to request immunity when her boss was going to prison as he and 24 others were busted for stealing money and just general law breaking mayhem. A guy named Jack Abramoff. And he stole like $10 million from U.S. natives. And again, 24 other people. And she worked for him. She was his direct number one. And as this dude's pleading guilty, she's like, listen, if you need, I will go under immunity and tell everything that everybody did. And it's like, wow, what a person you are. And
Right.
so yeah, so this is just step number one. We reiterated a lot was in NPR and found some new stuff. So we're gonna talk about that. So just keep that in mind, developers, Citizens for Responsible Solar, bad company. You know, everything they do is faked. They're fake arguments. So we need to counter it.
Yeah, and check out the episode that we're going to drop next week, which is a recording of our panel with Aaron Halimi of Renewable Properties and Dobby Wilson of Apex Clean Energy. The title of that is Overcoming NIMBYism, Best Practices for Solar Development. We talk a little bit about this phenomenon, but yeah, it is it's a little wild, the things that some people are doing to try to put the brakes on clean energy. And it's, as I like to say, it's us humans shooting ourselves in the foot, basically. So we're not the smartest bunch sometimes.
Sometimes.
All right, USDA scapes. Oh,
This is just I put this one here because it's local for you down the
yes, it
street.
is. Yes, it
And
is.
it's a couple of pretty pictures, and it's agrivoltaics, and
Yeah, I
really
saw
it's
Joe
just,
Scharf posting about this on LinkedIn also. So thank you,
All right.
Joe.
it may have been the same images. I just saw it on Twitter.
Yeah.
All that they said, it's just two images that they're done installing the solar, and it's now springtime, of course, and it's time to put down some crops. And so they'll be putting down some crops. There's a couple of cool images. You can see the space between the rows is pretty wide, and
Yeah,
and
you
that's
know,
it.
I think this is Solar Farm 2. It's a 13 megawatt project. It's been running for a couple of years now, and so they're just retrofitting in some agrivoltaics research into that because it's a 50-acre solar farm. And
Oh,
then in parallel, I think they also have some money now to do some more what I would call traditional agrivoltaics with racking that's going to be jacked up. I mean, you can see this is pretty
yeah.
standard racking. I believe it's Next Tracker, and so they're just doing some. I mean, it makes sense, right? Do some experiments. You got 50 acres. This is an area of the university called the South Farms, and it's research farmland, and now it's agrivoltaic research farmland. So let's get that other image.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
said there's 12 plots between the rows of solar panels, or 12 plots will be planted between the modules with soybeans and sorghum, and
Mm.
and that's pretty neat. I've not seen soybeans planted among modules yet. I was always under the impression that soybeans would want sunlight, 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 and all that they can get. So I'm interested because soybean is it the number two crop behind corn, or is it equal, or do you know that, Tim?
I don't know on a pure acreage basis, but they tend to rotate, or at least they used to. They're moving away from that
All right.
because modern science allows us to do that. But because soy is a nitrogen fixer,
Mm-hmm.
and so it improves the fertility of the soil. Um, but they're on par. There's a lot of soy in the Midwest here, in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, etc. It's corn and beans.
Corn and
Yeah,
beans.
I'm a little skeptical that you can grow soy in a solar field like this,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll see. I mean, I've talked to some corn and bean farmers. Uh, One in particular who's quite knowledgeable now, Matt Riggs, who runs Riggs Beer, and he's very interested in community solar and doing agrivoltaics, and his plan is to do hay cropping.
Okay.
Hay is in demand. Hay for feeding horses or cattle, and and it tolerates this lower light that you're going to get in an array. Whereas crops that need full sun, like he grows a lot of his own grains for his brewery,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, yeah, we can't grow the grains. They need full sun. They get this fungus or rust when there's not full sun because they don't dry out quick enough, and it's no good. So anyway, we'll see. It's good. Yeah, Scapes is a cool project, um, and it's good to see that moving forward. We would love to have somebody from Scapes on the show. I tried at one point to do a recording with someone there, and they missed the meeting. So I uh,
Well,
I said,
let me
well, they
send them a
obviously
tweet.
they don't understand what free press is. Yeah, send him a tweet. Maybe the U of I PR person will help wrangle a meeting. Uh,
Would be interested in coming on our podcast. Bam. So if you hit refresh uh, on that tweet, you'll now see that I just asked them, and I will make sure to stay on top of that. So cool. All right.
yeah,
I like this. Scapes. That's cool. So it's a 50 meg project or a 5 meg?
12,
12.
12 or 12 and a half, 50
That's
acre.
nice size. 50 acre. That's what you said. Cool.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Is it?
that's the whole solar farm too. I don't know what fraction they're using for Scapes.
Gotcha.
I have not read much about Scapes. I've just heard bits and pieces.
If you look
Um,
at those images, it looks like it's smaller plots, not big giant plots. When they said
yeah,
12 plots, and it looks like they're placing them between the modules at different spots so they can get data on the light collection. So
I
that's
wonder.
yep. All right, cool. So agrivoltaics, man, it's coming. I did a story this morning on agrivoltaics. We have a question out to a gentleman at Rutgers University. They have 3 small ag projects that have been under construction since the fall that are going into their pilot program. I wanted to get a little information on those because it's planting season. So it's pretty
Cool.
interesting to watch. Yep.
So you found a story about Q Cells. Q Cells builds pilot line for perovskite silicon tandem PV cells in South Korea.
$100 million power production line.
Have
Not
they
even
saw? The main problem with perovskites that I'm aware of. Well, there's 2 problems.
okay.
They degrade much more
Mm-hmm.
rapidly than traditional
Mm-hmm.
silicon PV, and they oftentimes contain lead, which is potentially environmental hazard. Lead is toxic to us and many other living things. Have they solved this problem of the short-livedness of perovskite?
So, in reference to short-livedness, we believe so. Technically, we don't know because we haven't had perovskites in the field for decades on end. But First Solar, and I even included it, First Solar just sold, and like the very next article attached to this is a company that First Solar just bought. First Solar is a thin film company. Perovskites are attached to silicon via a thin film like process, a vapor deposition.
Yeah.
And I don't know the technicals, but that's what it's called. And so it makes sense that a First Solar thin film product could be modified with a perovskite. So there's that. And that company explicitly says that they can make a 25-year perovskite module. They state it clearly. Additionally, I've been following the research on this just because, I'm a fanboy and I love this stuff. And the research coming out of South Korea and other places, but South Korea 3 years ago was already saying that they could produce a perovskite solar cell that could last 1,000 hours of accelerated testing. And 1,000 hours of accelerated testing is the lab distance, the lab time needed to emulate 25 years of real world. And so
100,000 hours?
no, 1,000. 1,000. And it's accelerated. So what they do is they make
Okay.
it hotter, they
Yeah.
make it run straight, and so they say, okay, roughly this is what it would like for being out in the real world. Like one place I learned did accelerated testing by just blowing heat straight on the unit for 1,000 hours straight, and that's like being in the sun straight for X this, and they have different ways of calculating this. So yes,
And just in
I
case you're
do-
wondering, that's 42 days. 1,000 hours is 42 days.
So
So
yes,
it's
I
a fair amount of testing, and it's very intense.
So I believe that the 25-year time frames have been hit. Now we have to learn how to manufacture them in the same product. A thing I learned is that perovskites, they want to be manufactured at a low temperature, whereas silicon is at a high temperature. And so to bring the two together, you have to figure out how to make a low temperature silicon module that
Yeah.
can not destroy the perovskite or some little mix of it in there. And that's another thing I've learned about. So it's coming. This might be the first official big time company putting down big time money in a public way. That's what. So Jenny Chase, she works for Bloomberg NEF, and that was always her phrase. Is that, listen, John, all these tweets are cool about all this whiz bang research laboratory stuff, but until somebody that matters, a big player, puts down money on a big line, it's all whatever. And so today when I showed this to her, she goes, "Okay, John, this one sounds cool. Maybe it'll be exciting in 2024 when they turn on the line. Let's see." So I'm hopeful, but I love this. I want to see
This
more.
referenced the pepperoni lab or process. We've referenced that before on the show. It's a laboratory in Europe. So, but yeah, I'm the tandem. As we've discussed many times on the show, there's many companies working on tandem technology.
Yep.
It's just a question of economics, because there's, PV is getting cheaper and cheaper, and so yeah, you can do tandem and get more, capture more energy, but at what cost, right? So there's always
I
a
mean,
trade-off.
these panels should cost not much more. We're going to add 2 machines, 3 machines, 4 machines to the manufacturing lines. And it shouldn't cost much more. That's going to be the key. And in 3 years, they'll catch up with their predecessors. Unless the new products are just sold at a premium just because they can be, which will occur initially.
Yeah.
It's going to be our first 30% efficient solar panel, man. We're going to jump 50% for the modules that are available. It's going to change our financial models significantly, Tim. It's going to be cool.
I'm not convinced. And the reason I'm not convinced is that when I was talking recently with PEG, Jurchin Technology, Matthew Lusk,
Yep.
who's the VP of Business Development for their North American operation, one of the things he said is, what's happening is you find these methods for creating higher ground coverage ratios, right? Coating the earth with solar panels wherever you have earth, as an alternative to using like trackers. And he's biased. He works for PEG, which is an east-west fixed tilt racking system. It's low to the ground. It's very dense. It's has wonderful wind resistance, so it's great for the hurricane zone. But he's like boldly predicting that these low steel, and there's one other company called Earthos that we've also talked about here on the show that's doing completely flat to the ground. And, because they're able to reduce the price of the installation perhaps as much as half. Okay.
Yeah, I've
Now,
seen the numbers. Yeah.
and that is disruptive. So anyway, the
Yeah, but
same
that-
thing kind
doesn't
of applies. Yeah, you can get higher efficiencies, but
Yeah.
the price is going to be higher, the degradation is going to be higher,
Nah.
and it may not pencil. So it's TBD. I'm open to
Yes.
tandem, man. I'm open to
Yeah.
tandem. I love new technology, but I'm also like, you might be surprised what emerges.
Yep. Yeah. I think pricing is going to be the same price per watt. I think it's going to go down price per watt. And I think the longevity is going to be 50 years because we're going to have glass of all of these. And
Yeah.
it's just going to do its job. At least,
So,
and I'm going to keep pitching it so that
oh,
we
I
keep our
didn't.
hope alive.
Okay. I didn't put it on screen, but you had a second story there about First Solar, so that's fine. We
Yeah.
should move on. We should move on
Yeah, next story.
and talk about an analysis found that solar power projects have seen interconnection costs on connected projects increase 100% over the last decade, while projects that choose not to connect tend to cost almost 400% than those who do connect. I don't understand what that is. Tell me what
I,
that is.
I had to parse it because it's a complex little analysis. So, NREL, the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory (LBNL) released a
Yeah.
report where they analyzed the interconnection queue history of the Southwest Power Pool, SPP, and that's like Arkansas. Well, maybe not Arkansas, but the
Probably.
Dakotas straight down. So I think it goes down to Arkansas. There's a map on the bottom of the article. And what they found is that over the last decade, solar projects, those who chose to interconnect, they show a price that has doubled for interconnection costs. And
Yeah.
then it was found that the projects that haven't interconnected, they've gone up by the same amount, but they already started from a much higher price. So the projects that have interconnected have got interconnection costs but have withdrawn, they have a 4 times higher interconnection price. And that number has gone up as well, only quote unquote by about 20 to 25%, from like 300 to $400 per kilowatt or watt, whatever the number was. But it just shows that number one, the price of interconnection has doubled for solar projects, and number two, there is a roof for what solar projects can afford. And we start to see some of it here with this analysis. They looked at like 200 projects, 30 that were already connected, like 120-ish, 110 that were in the process of connecting, and 50 that had withdrawn. And you can see some very clear differences in the cost of interconnection, how it's gone up. And my article only focused on the solar, but if you look here, you can see everything has gone up. Wind, solar, and price of interconnections going up apparently, just across the board.
Okay, well, first of all, what is the difference between network and POI? I mean, I know what a
Yeah.
POI is, but I'm not used to that the expression the cost of POI. I mean, there's the cost of interconnection, meaning what kind of upgrades you have to make to the grid in order to get your project interconnected, generally speaking, right?
So they're breaking it out in two ways. One, the POI is the upgrades that are going to be on site of the solar project, but still done by the utility, or it's still owned and forced. So local transformers, maybe the substation as well, because these are big projects that would hypothetically build their own substation. And so everything that's located on site. Then network is all the power lines that are between the location and getting the electricity to the source. So these are large scale ground mounts that aren't connecting to distribution. And so
Right.
that's how they break it out. And I do actually describe it in the article, how the article talks about network versus POI. And what matters here, and so that's a good thing to call out, network costs have increased while point of interconnection costs have decreased, partially because solar projects have scaled, and so local point of interconnection costs have fallen. But what that means is that the network costs, the power grid upgrades, have increased even more than we think. And that's because projects are being built further away. The good connections have been found, maybe. Different things, different reasons. So big scale interconnection costs going up. And it seems like we see a very clear roof, $400 a kilowatt or a watt, whatever that value was.
But is
Is
there
in
some
half.
indication that the utilities are playing unfairly in this regard?
Well, so actually, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this article, there's a link. And there was a link put out by, I think it's ACOR, who's the Association for the American Council on Renewable Energy. And
Yeah.
they did an analysis on power grid upgrade costs. And so that article didn't pop up, Tim. It stayed on this one. You might want to
Okay.
change the tab you're sharing. But
Okay.
they did an analysis on costs, and they found that $1.3 billion of upgrades were needed for like 12 or something renewable projects, or maybe six. And they found that a full quarter, and you have to go to the bottom of this article to see the data. They found that a full quarter of the financial benefits of those projects went to non-solar. Not so those that list right there. If you look at that list, the first column with numbers, it's the third from the end. That's the upgrade cost, and then the second to the last column are the financial benefits that have gone to non-solar, non-renewable project benefits per their analysis. And it's not supposed to be that way per ACOR. ACOR says the financial modeling should account for who's going to gain. Everybody should have to pay for their own share. Now, does it get into whether or not there are hardcore shenanigans trying to slow it down and people purposely, putting weight? I don't know. I mean, I'm probably not smart enough on this field, educated enough to really parse that stuff, but it does seem like wind and solar are paying a lot for upgrades. And here, very explicitly, it shows that a quarter of the of the projects in SPP, a quarter of their value went to other places, or a fifth, and a fifth of, we're talking $300 million that renewable projects paid for upgrades, and that value went somewhere else. That's a lot, dude. 300 million. I don't know about you. I mean, I know, Tim, you're a big time podcaster, so maybe that's chump change, but I'm still working on it.
300 mil. Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm very cynical, I guess, about the utilities, and they just clearly are trying to put the brakes on clean energy in a lot of ways, and so interconnection cost is one way they can do this, and
Yep.
it oftentimes will kill projects.
Oh, yeah.
It affects how they pencil or ROI, and then developers just walk away. So
I mean, that article itself showed that 50 out of 200 developers walked away because their interconnection costs were 400% higher than everybody else. So that's it.
yep. All right.
Talk about some poly.
Yeah, we didn't get to do that last week, I don't think.
We should talk about poly every week, Tim. It's an exciting topic these days. It really is.
Okay, what's the story? I'll put it on screen here. Well, we have a LinkedIn post from Bernreuter Research.
Yes.
I assume they're a German company.
Yes, they are. Small firm, maybe even just one guy who's an expert on research and poly. But he posted this on LinkedIn. Yeah, he's one of the few companies I follow on LinkedIn because he doesn't tweet or anything like that. So there's that. But he posted on LinkedIn that he's seeing in the news that there's enough polysilicon capacity coming to equal 3.5 terawatts per year of module manufacturing. Now, first off, all right, and Tim, you and I, we believe 3.5 is coming, in like 2035 or something, right? If you go into the comments, some random person says, oh man, this looks like they're saying 2027, Tim, 2027. And then if you look at Bernreuter's response, he goes, maybe that makes sense. And then on Twitter, PVEL, you know who PVEL is? We all know who PVEL is.
Yep.
PVEL released a document saying that by 26 or 25, they're expecting 1.8 to 2.2 terawatts of polysilicon by 26-ish. So I don't know if you remember, I was writing these stories last summer about LONGi, talking about 1 terawatt by the year 2030.
Yeah.
And I was astounded, and everybody was like, what? 1 terawatt? Oh my gosh. Bernreuter's saying 3.5 terawatts by 27, Tim. And PVEL just came out and said 2 terawatts by 26, 27. Okay, you hear me stuttering. I'm not certain what to say here other than those are big numbers, sir. Very big numbers.
The
And
market is responding to demand for solar panels.
I mean, where the heck are we going to put 3 terawatts a year of panels, dude? It's like, my gosh. I mean, China's probably going to do a terawatt a year. I mean, that's going to be the way it works. But holy, wow.
hmm
So I saw another thing. India has said that they want 400 to 500 gigawatts a year. So the global capacity right now.
hmm
Uh, they want to take the world, and we haven't even hit 500 yet. We're expecting somewhere in the 300s, middle 300s this year. I think we might hit 400. I dream of it. But India says they want
400
500
what?
gigawatts of solar panels deployed in 2023
In the world?
this year. That's my
Yeah.
high end. That's my whale sales pitch. The,
Okay.
the the normal number that all the logical people that get paid for this is like 320,
Yeah.
340. But last
And
year they
and
were way
the
off.
US is like 10% of that, right? Just to put it in
Yeah.
just to put it in context, like we tend to be very US centric, we Americans, but we're just a small piece of this massive industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're a good growth market and everyone's paying attention to us, but there are bigger markets. China's more than twice as big a market. And
Four times, 3 to 4 times, dude. 3 to 4 times bigger. Europe's bigger. India's going to be bigger in about 2 years too. We'll be number four, the number four market very soon.
wow.
Yeah. So it's the volume that's coming, the technology that's coming, the pricing that's coming. Uh, I think we just got to stay healthy, keep running, and eating bran flakes. You know. So, yeah. And I threw up a couple of other articles just to
Is that what you
complement
have
this
for
one.
breakfast? That sounds disgusting.
Yeah, yeah. I threw up two other articles to complement this one. There's one that shows the
Infolink spot
InfoLink.
price.
So spot price of polysilicon was down another 10-15% last week. You can see cells and wafers falling. It's about to fall below $20 per kilogram. And then the next link that I had is an image from Bloomberg that shows the price of solar panels are almost back to where they were in July of 2020, which was our low. And I think this doesn't even account for inflation. Let me double check that chart, see if inflation is measured in there. But either way, we're almost back. Inflation adjusted. Okay, yeah. So 23% fall off the peak. Inflation adjusted price, and we're getting close to the low price. So all this new polysilicon coming on is really starting to have an effect on the market and the downstream pricing of modules. So we're seeing things happen right now in the market. That's pretty interesting, and pricing's going to keep coming down. I wonder if we're going to see 20-cent solar panels again in the or ever in the U.S. though. I mean, we have all these import tariffs. It's like, my goodness, but stuff's happening.
Aren't solar panel prices in the mid 30s now? Like
Yeah,
35 cents.
you can get them. You can get them there. Yep,
So what is
you
this
can.
number though? 24, 22. What is that
Yeah,
for? What are you
that's
getting?
that's a solar panel anywhere else on Earth.
Oh,
It's, once you cross the maritime border into the land border,
mm,
managed by U.S. Customs,
mm-hmm,
that 35 cents is what you and I pay, Timothy, because
mm,
we are protecting our market against foreigners.
mm.
And so that 15 cents, that 13 cents, that's an import tariff that we're paying for various reasons. Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yep. So, such is life, I guess. So, polysilicon, pay attention to it. You're going to hear me post little articles. I'll try not to post one every week, Tim. I promise. Not every week.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean the price of solar modules is important, and it is, what you're talking about with this 3.5 terawatts, in the 2020s is pretty wild
Wild, dude. Yes.
because
Yeah.
it's 2023 now. You were talking about 2026, 2027.
7.
It's 3 years away. Um,
Yeah.
Well, do you want to do one more or?
Always want to do one more story. Always want to do one more. Okay, so we got wind and solar in Texas saved a whole bunch. A magazine said that PV magazine was the number one rated trade magazine, and then solar at 100%. What do you like?
Let's talk about Texas.
That's a good story. That's a great
link,
story.
The link is wrong, though.
The link is wrong.
The link is wrong.
Oh, when I clicked on it, it popped up. Here, want me to share?
It's the utility scale. It's
Yeah.
the same.
Oh, it's the utility scale story. Yeah, look, there you go, Tim.
The
Glad
link,
somebody's paying attention. The
the
link
link
is
is
being
wrong.
fixed right now.
John
It's
is
going to
wrong
the
and the link is
document.
wrong.
It happens twice every day before breakfast. All right, new link is up.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, so this story is me covering a document put out by Joshua Rhodes. He is a PhD somewhere in Texas, maybe from like University of Austin, but he's a smart guy. I follow him on Twitter, and he's always got smart things to say about Texas. And he works with a group that does research on energy pricing. And what they found is that wind and solar lowered the wholesale price of electricity by 26% in 2022. And because of the very high price of electricity, due to natural gas being through the roof, that equaled about 2 cents per kilowatt hour, and applied across the whole state was worth $11 billion in 2022.
Yeah.
And that's, if you scroll down, there's a nice graph that shows how they knocked down the wholesale price. But that's
Yeah, so
that's
the title is
fundamental.
Wind and Solar Energy Saved Texans $11 billion in 2022. It's so ironic, right, that the Texas legislature is in the process of killing the solar and wind
Yes.
industries.
Yes.
And yet we know, we energy professionals know that wind and solar are actually very good for Texans to the tune of $11 billion in 1 year.
In 1 year.
And 31 billion since 2010.
Yep.
So,
And it's going up every year. Like they have I didn't show the chart, but they show future numbers. I estimate it, but going forward, it's going to be like $4 to $8 billion a year.
why
as
was there
more
such a
and more.
jump from 21 to 22? Because of weather or because of the sheer volume of wind and solar?
Because the price of gas went up from $2 to $3, $3 per therm to 10, and here's the fundamentals. So the way it works is that you have a bunch of power plants running, and they all bid at a certain price.
Yeah.
And the way the author did this research, they said, well, these power plants, their price didn't get taken because there was quote unquote free wind and solar running. And so that meant that the price, instead of being 10 cents per kilowatt hour, was actually 6. And so what they did, they measured the price per kilowatt hour that the solar was. And if you scroll up, the previous chart that you were just at shows that price drop. So you can see in prior years what the wholesale price of electricity savings was. And this is what the jump is. That, in prior years, going way back, it was like a quarter of a cent.
Yep.
Up to recent years, it's about a cent per kilowatt hour. And then last year, because the price of energy was so high, the value of wind and solar was higher. And it managed to take more off the top. And it's also because wind and solar are growing. I mean, the volume, it's both, Tim. The price of electricity was up and solar was up. And so going forward, they predicted that even in a lower price solar market, savings are still going up to billions a year. Like the $10 billion number in like 4 years, that's going to be commonplace. Every year, Texans will save 10 to 15 billion, to whatever number, off their electricity price because of wind and solar. So it's the sheer volume and the fact that 2022 had gas pricing driven by a war in Europe and, international geopolitical shenanigans.
Yep. Indeed. Well, let's wrap up the show. Please check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. I'm going to put that on screen right now. And that is where you can find all of our pre-recorded interviews. We do one a week, like this one here with Zach Semke of the Passive House Accelerator, really great organization that is sharing knowledge and information about passive house construction. But there is the PEG Solar interview, And then, of course, this weekly live that we do. So check it out at cleanpowerhour.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is right there, linked from the homepage. And give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. But most importantly, John, the way people can help us here at the Clean Power Hour is to tell your friends about the show. And because many people just do not know that we exist and we're doing this for them, even though they don't know we exist. It's very ironic, but here we are. And how can our listeners find you, John?
The best way to find John Weaver is to go to commercialsolarguy.com. Leave us a contact us or give us a phone call. We are putting out a little bit of news now. We're just starting on it again. Check out our website. The second best place is LinkedIn. You can find John Fitzgerald Weaver or Commercial Solar Guy, or Twitter, where I post things constantly every single day just because there's so much to share for the world. So commercialsolarguy.com. And Tim, how should people chase you down if they want solar consulting, developing, and all the other work you do?
I like LinkedIn a lot. That's a good
right.
place to find me. I will respond if you chat me up on LinkedIn. And cleanpowerhour.com. Subscribe to our email list. There's a contact us form right there. So just cleanpowerhour.com if you don't use LinkedIn, which is something you should use. It's the one good or very good social network that I, firmly believe in. And I don't think you can be in modern business without being on LinkedIn. It's a de facto replacement for your website in many respects. Your LinkedIn profile is just as important as your website. So anyway, well, thank you very much, John Weaver, Commercial Solar Guy, for being here week in, week out, and we will see you next week. Take care.